Jonathan LaBonte is the speaker for the evening. He is the executive director of the Androscoggin Land Trust, and he's also a county commissioner. Treat him well because he's our landlord. Here we are in the county building. He grew up in New Auburn. So he's a native and went to St. John's High School, then went to the University of Maine, and now is in the public policy field, and as I indicated, the director of the Androscoggin Land Trust. He's interested in history, and in his current position he's gathered various information about the Androscoggin River, and so tonight he'll tell some of the tales that he's come across with regard to the Androscoggin. Okay, Jonathan LaBonte.
I apologize for the technical difficulties, but I guess one of the perks of being a county commissioner, I was able to call the sheriff. Then had his chief deputy come down, and they had a projector with the right cable I needed. So it could have been a disaster, but it was a well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you tonight. And I want to start by offering my sympathies for the loss of Gordon Windle, who was a longtime member here. I had a chance to get to know Gordon a little bit. At EL basketball games, he used to spend some time chatting with my folks who said, "There's this guy that sits next to us, he's all about history, you should talk to him." So I was able to learn a lot from him and his passion, and he's beyond sort of finding active members for the Historical Society. He's one of those rare people who really were passionate about what history could teach us about today, and we need to find ways to pass that along to the next generation. Otherwise, if we forget where we came from, that's going to have an effect we don't want to have on where we're going. So one of the things I'm going to talk a bit about tonight with what the Androscoggin Land Trust does and some of the projects we've accomplished is how we can thread the narrative of this region's history into the projects we do, and as we get people outside being physically active, canoeing, hiking, snowshoeing, or anything else in between. I always open presentations with the vision statement for the Land Trust. Now, our vision is a network of public and privately held conservation lands where the scenic and ecological integrity of the landscape is balanced with diverse and vibrant communities. It is a mouthful, but really says something unique about our organization, and that what we do in the landscape, what we do conserving land for wildlife and ecological value, really needs to be balanced with communities that are vibrant, diverse, are looking to learn, wanting to experience the landscape. And scenic doesn't just mean views over farm fields. The paddling view coming into downtown Lewiston, when you can first catch a glimpse of the stack from the Bates Mill, that's just as scenic and just as important as those farm fields are. A little bit about us. We were founded in 1989, so we're entering our 22nd year now in 2011. And we work in 19 communities in the Androscoggin watershed. Those 19 communities spread out among all are part of 4 different counties, about 500 square miles and over 120,000 people. Very different communities, from Jay and Canton and Livermore Falls to the north, through Lewiston, Auburn, into Lisbon and Durham. We can serve nearly 5,000 acres now under our management and our stewardship, not counting what I'll mention later at the Androscoggin Riverland State Park, where we've helped the state to protect over 2,600 acres of land. And we also can serve more than 10 miles of frontage on the Androscoggin River. I won't really get a lot into the nuts and bolts of what we do as a land trust and our core business to conserve land and steward it in perpetuity, which is a significant responsibility, not unlike what you folks do here, protecting the history and taking things into your archives and accepting responsibility to steward those assets. I'm going to try to thread some of these projects. It won't be a perfect history through the early 20th century, but I'll do the best that I can do. The Androscoggin River is one of Maine's 3 major rivers, and it's not like the other 2. Maybe I say that because I've convinced myself I'm working on this river. I need to make sure it's unique when I give presentations. The Kennebec and the Penobscot, which were known for their log drives, known for their mills, we were the same. The Kennebec and the Penobscot served as transportation rivers, not just for the Native Americans, but for trade. For settlers, for Europeans coming from New England, up those rivers to access raw materials and then to ship them out to market. Because of the nature of the Androscoggin River and the way that it falls from the headwaters to Merry Meeting Bay, it was never positioned for transportation. There were way too many rapids, some very steep drops, Lewiston being one, Rumford being another. It was never possible to be a transportation corridor, and that really did a lot to help protect the Native American tribes, the Androscoggin, which called this region home. And there are some unique features here that because we weren't a transportation river, that the opportunities for those tribes to be protected originally from perhaps rival tribes to the west or to the east, but also protecting from settlers who first came to Brunswick and then moved up the Kennebec before they began moving north of Brunswick on the Androscoggin. Many people don't know this, so we're up into Oxford County, but Canton Point was at its heyday the largest Native American village in all of New England. It really was a base village where the natives, based on season, could travel north and south. But that was really their base opportunity to set up as a community. And certainly part of tying the communities of the river together. We often feel quite separated now the way we live our lives, with the Androscoggin living sustainably on the Androscoggin River meant using all of it and settling on different sections for different uses. I often build this slide up from presenting in Lewiston Auburn or up in Jay, Livermore Falls, but certainly the transition from the Native Americans to the industrialists. Many of you will know the gentleman on the left or will have heard his name, Benjamin Bates. Certainly his namesake floats around this community with Bates Manufacturing and Bates College. To his right is Hugh Chisholm, who's known best north of here for building up the mill towns of Jay, Livermore Falls, Chisholm Village, and Rumford. He was the founder of International Paper. He was a newspaper salesman out of southern Quebec who was good friends with Thomas Edison before he became an industrialist himself. So our narrative here of textiles, predominantly around Benjamin Bates, is a different story, but a similar story north of here with the gentleman on the right. So let's get into some of the stories of the land. I'll highlight some of the conservation projects of the Land Trust as I walk through this. One of the most recent projects that we've accomplished, let's see if I can point to the screen. This small island here with a really small 26 on it that you can probably barely read is also this small island here. In 2009, the town, and I look to my stewardship director, Mike, in the back here to correct me if I give any facts or dates that are incorrect. In 2009, the town of Lisbon approached the Land Trust and said that they own an island on the river, and they saw our model of stewarding the land and being responsible for the land and engaging the community in stewardship, that they were more confident putting the title to that island in our hands going forward. In 2009, the town council voted unanimously to make that transfer. And whenever we take ownership of property, there's a lot of research into the ecology of the area, gathering some basic information about the land, but also spending some time trying to learn the history. What we call the property, how will we let people know about what we've done and how we've done it. And as we did some research, we reached out to our friends at the Lisbon Historical Society, and they shed a very interesting light on this property. They had the deed work, the research, all the way back to 1684. So at the time, that was Cumberland County. Androscoggin County still had almost 2 centuries to go before it would be created by the legislature. It was the first transfer from the native tribe at the time to Richard Wharton. We haven't uncovered who Richard was or what his story was or why he was the first to take title to the land. Something we may work on in the future as we develop information for maybe paddlers that would pass this island on trips. In 1780, there was another transfer from Thaddeus Mason, who was an heir of the Pajepskit proprietors, which were really the early industrial settlers to the region. A lot of the land was transferred to them. they, with other investors or investor partners, would transition the land for industrial purposes, residential or commercial purposes. Thaddeus Mason transferred the land to Moses Little. That name will be important later on as we connect other pieces of the landscape to the Little family. And of course, many of us in this room probably know some of the other descendants of the Little family. The land was transferred to Moses Little, and it was part of a transfer on both sides of the river. And right now we know both sides of the river as Lisbon and Durham. But what the deed work from the Historical Society pointed out was that until all of the land left the Pejevska proprietors' hands, the Lisbon shore of the Androscoggin actually was part of the town of Durham. And in turn in Cumberland County and not Lincoln County. So the county line actually stretched to the other side of the river for a period, perhaps as part of the first industrial purchases. There are obviously some holes in this story that we'll continue to look to fill, but it's interesting to be able to trace the land transfers all the way back to the native tribes, again, part of this narrative of how the land transitioned to those early industrial settlers. Back to Moses Little, and also the Pejevska proprietors and the Little investors. The Massachusetts had interest not just in the Lisbon area, but north along the river, at least through Lewiston, Auburn. There's a picture of one of the early sawmills that sat at the base of the falls. There were a series of sawmills and grist mills, many of them susceptible to fire, and many of them then burned down. Of course, the last of the mills at that site, the Cow, we all saw lost a couple of years ago through a fire. A gentleman by the name of Lawrence Jackson Harris lived in Massachusetts. And the Littles, who now had control of real estate in Lewiston, Auburn, needed someone to come and do something with that real estate. So they went to Massachusetts and sought to recruit investors. And to recruit those investors who had capital, putting land on the table was something of value. So Lawrence Jackson Harris became the third settler to the city of Lewiston. He was one of the first three to come here, and part of the agreement with Moses Little was that he would invest in a mill. He'd be given land at the head of the falls, and he was also given additional land in what was then called Lewiston Plantation. We now know as the town of Greene. Lot 144 in that plantation, to be exact. For the first few years of Lewiston settlement, what we now call the Great Falls, or what we call the Lewiston Falls, was actually known as Harris Falls. Because of Harris's recruitment here to Lewiston and his early investments in the sawmill. Mr. Harris, or Captain Harris, had a son whom he named Moses Little Harris, who ultimately built a home, was also a captain in the local militia, built a home in the town of Greene. And this is really where, for us, the Land Trust, we get excited about some of these connections with what we do. Moved to the town of Greene, and given the amount of work we're undergoing, we have not issued a press release about this project being accomplished, so you folks are the first to hear about this. The map is not quite clear here in Greene. I apologize for the aerial. There's a white line, you can follow me, that cuts across. That's Route 202 in Greene. The property in Greene here is actually Land Trust conserved land at Hooper Pond, or Little Sabattis Pond in the town of Greene. It was a significant Land for Maine's Future project that we accomplished in partnership with the town of Greene to pull that together. Here in red is the Captain Harris homestead property. This property, which is not the full assemblage of Lot 144 from that original recruitment from Massachusetts of the Harris family, but is most of it, including some of the early home foundations. This property has been in the same family, the Harris family and their descendants, since that time. And the descendants, the heir that owns all of the property, Alicia Furman, reached out to the Androscoggin Land Trust, and at the end of last year, we conserved permanently the entire 326-acre parcel with significant frontage on Hooper Brook. From a conservation and ecological standpoint, it's a very important wildlife corridor between Little Sabattis Pond, or Hooper Pond, and Sabattis Lake. So for all the great reasons of the region's ecology, protecting large undeveloped blocks, this is a great project. But it also permanently protects the original homestead, farmstead, and woodlot of the Harris family, the third settlers to the city of Lewiston.